Hey everybody, welcome to Bill Sky the Linux Guy, and what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at navigating the Linux file system. I was going to jump into attributes, file attributes right away, but I don't think I really explained the Linux file system very well, especially the commands how to navigate it. So I think we should just jump right into it. Okay, so I have Alma Linux here now. This is the same on CentOS, Ubuntu, Red Hat. There are little differences, but in this case, they're not really that important. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to Activities, and I'm going to click on the Files app. And the Files app is basically a window into the file system. It simply shows you what is in the file system, the directories, the files. It's a nice graphical user interface to view those items. And I'm going to click on Other Locations, and then I'm going to click on Computer. And these are all of what they call the root directories. What is the root? The root is the top level of the file system. It is the starting point for all directories and all files and where they're put. And you'll notice that there's a whole bunch of directories here. Now, I'm using the term directories quite a bit because directories is basically the same as folders. Folders was a Windows thing that came out, I guess it was in Windows 95, might have been in Windows 3.1. But years ago, Microsoft started calling them folders when actually they were directories. So if I use the word folders, if I use the word directory, they mean the exact same thing. So you'll see these folders here, you'll see these directories here, and each directory means something different. Now, I'm not going to go into every one of these directories and show you what they mean. Probably the most important directory that you'll ever use as a Linux user is the home directory. And the home directory is where your folder is, where your home folder is. And if I go in there, there's my home folder, Linux user. I can go in there, and inside of that folder are a group of other folders. Here's my desktop folder. It's what's displayed on my desktop. Now that could be kind of confusing because in the GNOME user interface there really aren't desktop icons anymore. You can actually create those icons using a GNOME extension, which we might do in an upcoming video. But it's a little bit confusing because GNOME isn't really the file manager anymore on the most recent GNOME, and this is, the middle of 2024. Then you've got your documents. That's where you put all of your spreadsheets, you put your word processing documents, test documents. When I go into there, I have an awful lot of development folders. And each one of those folders, like here's for C projects, here's for Fortran, COBOL, assembly language, Python, Rust. Each one of those is a folder that's going to contain files, and then you can see some of the files here. So let's go back, and so downloads, that's where you download stuff to. Music was where you might save music. Pictures is where you're going to put some of your pictures if that's what you're using Linux for. Public is a folder that you may share with the public. So if you want everybody to be able to see it on the Linux operating system, on the Linux computer you're running on, you might put those files or pictures or whatever in public. Snap, that's a package management folder, and we're going to talk more about that when we talk about installing applications. Templates is kind of neat because any file that you put inside of templates will actually show up when you click and say new file. So templates is kind of neat. And then videos, as you can imagine, are for your videos. Now we're using the graphical user interface of the operating system, but there's actually a much better way of doing this. There's a much better way of doing this. And I'm going to go up to Activities. I'm going to go to the terminal. And from here, I'm going to type in the command tree / Now, the / is the root folder. It is the top of the root. It is the top of the file system. It's where I want to start. And the tree command means display a tree. So I'm going to say start at the root of the file system. -L means level, and I want to do 1 level. And you can see right here, here's a really nice way of displaying. Now you might think, oh, the GUI is a lot better. Well, when we get into issuing commands, you're going to see the GUI is not as good as the command line or the terminal. So you can see right here we have the root folder, which is at the very top, and then we've got all of the other folders. This right here, this is a link because you have an arrow there. We'll talk more about that when we get into links. Here's dev, and each one of these means something. So take a look at the video notes or take a look at the navigating the terminal environment or introduction to the terminal environment to get more details about that. But you'll also see that we have the home folder there. So the root is the beginning. It is the top of the file system. Everything starts at the root. Now I could do that tree command again. This time I could say 2, and what that'll do is it'll display more of a tree. It'll show 2 levels down from the root. Now you can see there's an awful lot of stuff here, and I'm going to go back all the way to the top so we can start off, and you can see that the boot directory, it contains files, it contains folders. You can see the EFT and the grub2 folder. So there's an awful lot here. You could also specify just show me directories. Now, I don't remember off the top of my head what that argument is. So I'm going to use the man command and man pages, and I'm going to say man tree, and I'm going to say directory. Oh, slash directory is the term I'm looking for. And I'm just going to look for the argument that says list directories only, and there it is right there. So it's D. So I'm going to quit, and I'm going to do the tree -L2-D, and you can see now there's no files. These are all directories, believe it or not. These are all directories being displayed. And a directory under a directory is called a subdirectory. So the directory mount, which is part of the root folder, it's actually the directory on the root folder. We have a subdirectory called HGFS, and that is the subdirectory of mount. Same here, proc. Proc is a directory right underneath the root, and you can see that there's a subdirectory 1001, which is a subdirectory under proc. Now, there is no way you can see all of this in the GUI. If you want to get an overall view of the subdirectory, of the file system structure, all the directories, subdirectories, you really can't do that with the GUI. You have to double click on each separate directory, and it's very easy to lose your place. So using tools like tree really helps out. Now, if you tried this on your Linux while you're watching this video and it doesn't know what tree is, if you're on Ubuntu, do a sudo apt install tree. If you're on Debian, or I'm sorry, that is Debian. If you're on Red Hat, if you're on CentOS, if you're on Alma and tree isn't there, sudo dnf install tree. And then type your password, and that will install the tree tool. And I've already got it installed there, so no need for that. So tree is a really nice way to be able to see what's going on in the file system, or what is actually set up in the file system. Now, before we move on to the next command, I want to actually show you on this terminal. You can see that Linux user is my username. The @ sign means @ and localhost is the local host. It's the local computer that I'm currently running on. And then after that, you're going to see this little tilde. It's that little squiggly line. It's right to the left. It's the key right to the left of the number 1 key on your keyboard by pressing the shift key. And you'll see that. What that little tilde means, I'm in my home directory. So first of all, I'd like to see what's in my home directory. So I'm going to say ls, just ls, and press enter, and you can see all of those directories. We have the desktop, the documents. That's something we saw in the GUI. Now, if I want to see details about those, which we'll be using in the next video when we talk about attributes, if I say ls-al, those are arguments that say I want to see everything. I want to see a listing, a detailed listing of everything in that directory. And you can see it even shows hidden files. And so here's my desktop. Here's my documents directory. It's owned by the Linux user ID. It's part of the Linux user group. It's 4096 bytes in size. It was created May 1st. Actually, it was last accessed May 1st at 12 noon. And the name of it is Documents. And we'll be getting into all of this stuff, all this other stuff when we talk about file attributes. And so those are directories. The other way that you can tell that it's a directory is that the far left character over here, that D, that means it's a directory. If it's just a dash, that means it's a file. So the ls command is really, really useful. Now, if I just say ls, that's a relative listing. That's a relative listing. It means that I just want to list what's currently in where I currently am. And where am I? If I type pwd, that's another command, I'm in the Linux user directory, which is in the home directory, which is under root. And you can see root is right here with the slash. You can see it right there on the left of home. It's kind of a little bit difficult. There you go. So that's a relative. Now, if I want to display everything in what we call a absolute path, I would say ls home Linux user. Now, this looks exactly the same. The display will be exactly the same as just the ls. The difference is that we've got a relative, which means show me everything from my relative, from my starting point where I am right now in the file system, which happened to be under home Linux user, and the absolute path says show me it, from the root, which is the slash, then home, then the Linux user. And you might say, well, why would you want to do that? Well, what if I'm at the root and I do an ls and I want to see my files, I want to see my subdirectories in my home folder? Well, if I just type ls, it's showing me all of the subdirectories and files right off of the root. However, I would need to type, let's say I don't want to leave the root. Let's say I want to display my directories and my files in my home folder while I'm still at the root level. You can see that the absolute path is necessary. Now there's something else here, this change directory, cd space slash. That's our first navigation command, and what that did was that said take me out of the home Linux user directory, or I should say Linux user home directory, and take me to the root. And the root is this slash right there. It is the /. Now in Windows, it may look like something like this, \, but we're not working on Windows, we're working on Linux, we're working on a Unix operating system, so it's slash. So that's how you could do it. So I'm going to ls here, and I don't know, let's take a look at bin. So I'm going to change directory to bin. Now I didn't need this / there because I was already in the root. So you can see I'm already in the root by using the pwd. So I could have just said bin, change directory bin, and that's a relative path because it says start from where I currently am, and it took me into bin. However, I decided to do /bin in an absolute path, which starts me at the beginning of the file system and takes me into bin. And if I say ls, you can see all of the stuff. Again, you can see the dash right here, which means it's a file. The L right here means it's a link. Again, a completely different subject, a separate subject. We'll talk about that later. And there's just an awful lot of stuff in there. Okay, so that's how you can move around the file system. Now, if you get lost, if you're not sure where you are, you can always type pwd, and you can see that you're in the bin subdirectory. Now, that's actually something that the GUI is not by default showing you. It's not showing you your path all the way from the root. So, again, something in the terminal that might be very useful. Now, let's find a directory inside of here. Actually, let's go to the user subdirectory. So I'm inside of bin. You can see the pwd. I'm going to say change directory user bin. And you can see all of these files and subdirectories you can navigate. I'm going to say change directory. I'm going to say pwd. So you can see I'm in the bin directory under user. I'm going to say cd ... What the ... is it means go to the parent directory without having to type it all in. Now if I type pwd, you can see I'm in USR. I went up a level. I can then say change directory to bin. I'm pwd. I'm back in user bin. But let's go back up. And I'm going to say -al. And I want to show you what that ... is. The ... is a directory. It's a directory that simply, it's almost like a pointer. It says go to the parent directory. And so if I say change directory ... it'll take me to the parent, which in this case, it was user when I was inside of bin. What is the parent ... right now? Well, if I type pwd, you can see the parent is actually the root, the slash, not the /u, but just the slash. Okay. So I can change directory into any of these. I can change directory to source. I can take a look at what's in there. -al, I can see all the details for what's in there. So ls, change directory, some of the most common commands that you'll use in the terminal environment. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the user subdirectory, and I'm going to create a directory. So I'm going to say mkdir, mkdir, bills dir. Oops, there's a security problem here. It's not allowing me to do that inside of the USR directory. That's a security protection thing. So we're going to talk about that in a following video on file security and attributes. But for right now, I did this just to show you that you really, as a normal user, you really cannot create a directory there. Now you could say super user do make directory bills dir. Oh, I didn't type that in right. And now there's bills dir. But that's very, very dangerous. You don't want to do that unless you're actually doing it for a real purpose, for a real, there's a real reason to do it. So that's how you make a directory. Now I'm going to delete that directory. If I try to say remove directory, rmdir means remove directory, bills dir, it says permission denied because I did it as a super user. So in this case, I'm going to say sudo remove dir, bills dir, and it should be gone now. And there it is. It's gone. So we talked about creating a directory. Now, where do you want to really do this? Well, I'm going to change directory to tilde. Now, if I say, remember when we talked about the prompt a while ago, there was that little tilde while we were in our home folder. Change directory space tilde means go to our home folder. And before we do that, I'm going to say pwd. I'm in user. I'm going to say change directory tilde. Now I'm going to type pwd. I'm in home Linux user. So I'm in the Linux user. That's my user ID. Home directory. I'm in Linux user under home. And from there, I'm going to say change directory documents. And I don't know, let's say I want to create, let's say I have a project. So I'm going to call it project run. So I'm going to say make directory project one. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but most of my directory names, or all of them, are all undercase. There's no spaces in them. If I want to make project space one, let's see what just happened. It created, because I had a space there, it created a directory called project and a directory one. So normally you don't do that. Normally you do not put spaces in directory names in Linux. You can, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now, but let's clear up those directories. So I'm going to say remove directory one, remove directory project. And if I want to actually create a directory with spaces in it, I'm going to put double quotes or single quotes around that name. And now you can see project one right there. And notice the file system also shows a quote around it. So I really don't recommend you do that because you've got to put quotes around everything. I'm going to say remove directory project one. And now it's gone. Okay, so there's my project one directory. So let's say I want to actually go into that folder or that directory. I'm going to change directory project one. Now, that was the relative method of doing it. I also could have said change directory home Linux user. Whoops, didn't type that in right. I could have done it that way. Oh, I didn't type it in right. So let's just go back. So I'm going to say change directory home Linux user. I typed in my user ID name wrong. Documents project one. And now I'm back into it. So I could have done it the absolute way. Let's say I don't like that directory name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change directory to the parent. There's project one. If I want to rename that directory, I'm going to say move project 1A. So the mv command is how you rename something. On Windows, I believe it was rename. But, and that might, I didn't even know there was a rename here. What is the rename command? So I'm going to type man rename. And it says rename files. So it isn't really, maybe it is for renaming directories. Let's try that. I'm going to say rename project 1A, project 1B. And it doesn't let me do that either. So rename is something different. So we renamed it from project 1 to project 1A, and you can see the renamed directory there. So it's the move, it's the mv command to do that move. Okay, so let's say I would like to create some files inside of that project 1A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change directory project 1A, There's nothing in there. I always like to do ls-al. There's absolutely nothing in there. The double dot means the parent. So this double dot right here means the parent, and the single dot means the current directory. That's something, I use it a lot, but a lot of people don't use it. And we'll talk about that when we talk about executable files and things like that. But it means do it in the current directory. So let's go ahead and create a file, and we'll see that dot in use in just a moment. So I'm going to say touch file, let's call it intro.txt, and let's keep everything lowercase. And there it is, intro.txt. It has 0 in size. It was created May 1st at 12:29. So intro.txt is a file. Now if I want to remove it, I'm going to say remove intro.txt, and the rm command removes the file. But let's create that again. So I'm going to say touch intro.txt. I'm going to say touch, I don't know, members.txt, touch tasks.txt. What I'm doing is I'm creating all of the files that my project 1A might be interested in having. Okay, I'm going to say touch assignments.txt. And you can see all those there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and edit some of those files. So I'm going to use the nano and then the vim editor. You're going to see two different editors here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say nano /, which means the current directory, intro.txt. Now in the case of nano, you don't really need that /, but I use it all the time out of habit. And just eliminates the amount of errors that I produce. So I'm going to say nano./intro. There's my nano editor. I'm going to say this is an introduction to the project. More to come. And now I'm going to press the Control X key on my keyboard. You can see that down on the bottom left of the window, which means exit. It says, do you want to save it? I'm going to say yes. Give it a name. I'm going to press enter, use the name. And there is the intro. The intro is now 55 bytes in size, so it's a little bit bigger. Okay, now I'm going to use the vim, so I'm going to say vim members.txt. Now vim is a VI editor. It's an extension of the VI editor. It's a very, very popular text editor. It may look horrible to you, but boy, if you can put this on your resume that you know VI or vim, it's going to really help you out. So I'm going to press the I key, which means insert. And you can see on the bottom left it says insert. And I'm going to say a list of the members of this project, more to come. Now I'm going to press the escape key, shift : right, and quit. Now you might look at this and say, oh my God, why would you ever use this editor? It is my absolute favorite editor. Well, after ISPF, but it is mainframe editor, but it is my favorite editor. Let's list it, and now you can see members has 61. Okay, now let's just say that this is the way that I'll always be creating a project. I'll always have these 4 files. I'll have the assignments, intro, members. I might want to actually go in here and edit assignments and edit tasks. Let's say I want to make this into a project template so I don't have to do this every time I create a project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change directory to the parent. We can see now I'm back in documents. There is project 1A. I'm going to rename that. I'm going to say move project 1A to project template. So there we go. There's project template. Now, instead of having to do all those files, creating all those files, what I want to do is I want to create a new project called project 1 using the project template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say copy -recurse, -r means recurse. That means copy everything in the directory and every directory and file within that directory. And I'm going to say project template to project 1. LSAL. There's project 1. I'm going to change directory to project 1. Oh, there's everything. Now I'm going to do another one. I'm going to say cat, which means, I'm not sure what cat stands for, maybe catalog, but I want to actually display the contents of intro.txt. And there's that content. I could then say vim intro.txt, and I could actually put in here, this is our first project, started on May 1st. And I could put details about this specific project. So now we've got a folder. We've got a directory for our project. Now, you could argue everything we've been doing here is actually easier on the terminal or on the GUI. I don't know if I agree with that. I think in this case, it is arguable that it might be just as fast. However, when we get more into the terminal usage on Linux, you're going to see that terminal really has advantages over the GUI. So here we go. So documents. So how would I actually have created that project template? Well, here's my project template. How would I actually create project 2? Well, I could right click and say copy. I could then right click on the background and say paste. Now I've got to go in and rename it. It's already taking me longer. And there's project 2. I could go into project 2 now, and I could edit it using my favorite GUI editor. Okay, so that took me a little bit longer. If I want to delete it, I could just right click on it and delete it, or I could click rename. So I'm doing a lot more clicks. But then to be fair, I'm not actually typing in the command. So for this example, it's not really that much more useful to use the terminal than the GUI. However, it does become much more useful to use the terminal when you get into more complicated things, especially attributes and things like that. Okay, so we talked about renaming a directory. What about renaming a file? So let's go into project 1, and let's rename the intro file to project 1 intro. So I'm going to say move intro.txt to project 1 intro.txt. So using the move command, not only can you move or rename directories, but you can also rename files in the same way. And there's project 1 intro. Let's move directories. Let's actually move directories. So you can see project 1 and project 2. Now I'm in my documents folder. Let's say I want to create a projects folder within documents and put those two projects folder inside my projects folder. Those two project folders inside my project folder. So I'm going to make directory projects. I'm going to move project 1 to projects. And I'm going to move project 2 to projects. Project 1 and project 2 are gone. Now they're inside of my projects folder. That's pretty cool. So, and then you can rename those things. And it is a little bit confusing. Moving directories and files around is the same. It's the same. It uses the same command, move, as renaming them, which I always found was a little bit confusing when I first started learning Unix, but it seems to work. We already talked about copying. We could copy entire directories. Let's change directory into project 2. And let's copy intro.txt. So I'm going to say copy CP. Now we're not going to say -r this time because we're not recursing into the file. We just want to copy the file. So copy intro.txt, intro2.txt. And you can see that it copied it. What if I called it the same file? Intro.txt, intro2.txt. You get an error from the command saying the same name. So when you get used to the terminal environment, it really does get a lot better. Or a lot, yeah, it is a lot faster than the GUI. Okay, so actually, I kind of lost track of where I am, so that's where I am. Okay, so I want to go back to the documents folder. Now, what I could do is I could say change directory home Linux user documents. I could use the absolute method. I could have done this, change directory ... and then change directory ... again. That will get me up to the documents folder. But I got a little trick for you. I'm going to say change directory ... So that takes me to the parent of project 2. The /... takes me to the parent of projects. And now I'm in documents. So let's say I want to get rid of all of those. I quit my job. I'm not interested in keeping those projects anymore. So I want to delete everything. So I'm going to say remove directory. Oh no, I'm going to say rmdir. Force recurse, that means do the same thing, force it without asking me first. That's what the F means. The R means recurse into all of the subdirectories underneath the project directory. And that will delete everything. Whoa. Let's take a quick look at that here. So let's look at projects. There's my 2 projects. I've got full files in each one. It would be almost like me right-clicking on the folder and saying move to trash. However, when you do it on the terminal, it's permanent. You're not moving it into the trash, you're actually deleting it. So press enter. Wow, that happened so fast. And now, projects is gone. Project 1, everything inside of it is also gone. So let's do another. I'm going to use the tree command again. I'm going to change directory to tilde, and I'm going to say tree dot, which means current directory, -L2. And we can see all of the files and folders underneath my home directory. Another way I could have done that is I could have said tree/home Linux user -L2, and it shows the same thing. So that was the absolute path. The first way we did it was the relative path. One last thing I want to show you is deleting a single file. We talked about removing or deleting an entire subdirectory. I'm going to go into Documents again. I'm going to go into Project Template. And let's say I just want to remove tasks.txt. I'm just going to say rm for remove task.txt. And now it's gone. Now, one thing that's a little bit confusing here is rm is used for removing files. rmdir is used for removing directories. However, if you want to remove files and subdirectories, you don't use rmdir, you use rm. So let's say if I want to get rid of my project template directory, I could say rmdir recurse project template. It said, well, first of all, I said F. Let's change that to an R. Okay, well, I keep pressing R, F. Why do I keep doing that? There we go. Invalid option R. So you really don't have a recurse. You don't have a way of removing everything. So you have to use the RM. So I'm going to say rm-fr project template. And now my project template folder is gone. All right, so that's an introduction to navigating the file system on Linux. Take a look at the terminal environment video. If you're not really familiar with the terminal environment, take a look at the notes for this video on what each one of those directories means or what each one is used for in Linux. And I think the next thing we're going to do in my video series is that we're going to talk about the attributes of those files. Remember when I did that ls-al? Oh my God, all that stuff in here. I want to actually demystify all that and actually talk about what each one of those things are so you can really, really manage your file system and actually protect it and keep it secure. So until then, hope to see you soon.